Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
What's up, everybody, and welcome into the Philly Sports Power Hour with Bill Colarulo. Appreciate you all being here nice and early on this Tuesday. We got the unbiased opinion by Bridget Tobin. Best show in the whole world, she says, to start the show on YouTube. We got a good show today. I promised you yesterday that we were going to talk about where he ranks in the NFC in terms of quarterbacks. And I told you yesterday, go home, do your homework, and be ready to debate today if you disagree with my rankings. I did my rankings yesterday. I put them on social media. Blowing up on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people agreeing with me, a lot of people disagreeing with me. But we're going to talk about my quarterback rankings in the NFC right now, February 20th, 2024. Also want to talk about that joke of an analyst, Chris Sims, because we talked about that over the weekend on my radio show. We'll talk about that. I also want to talk about something that came out that the Kansas City Chiefs did that they're getting all types of credit for, that I think the way we cover the Eagles in this town, if this was the Eagles, we'd be killing them for it. But we'll talk about that. Talk a little bit of Phillies as well, and if there's time, we'll get into the defensive roster for the Eagles and what I need to see Howie Roseman do this offseason. But this is the Philly Sports Power Hour. I appreciate everybody here. We're streaming live on Bill Colarulo Philly Sports Talk. We're streaming live across the JAKIB Sports networks. So make sure you're subscribed and following both me and JAKIB Sports. We're also live here on TikTok as well. But let's get a little roll call in the chat from the Power Hour crew. Jason Lombardi, inspector from Dry Tech. I'm wondering if that's the real Jason Lombardi that does the commercials. But good morning. Top of the chat. Fanny Eagles fan girl, William Stark, Pickle Tickler, Mr. Poopy Pants. These names, man. Bridget Tobin, as I already said. Chuck Hutton, Twiz, Bry Guy, Jason A-Team, I'm Awake, Peter Doty, Adams Exploits, Steve Ike, the ARS Bench. That is right. Bill Spadaro is in the house today. Who else we got in the chat here today? James Jones. Someone needs to give me a drug test. Uh-oh, James Jones is already disagreeing with me. Kevin Savard here. Soul Vane. Coal Mine Farms. Who we got here on TikTok? Let's see a little check-in. We got the TikTok people checking in as well on the Philly Sports Power Hour. But go ahead, hit that like button for me. Hit that share button for me. And we're going to jump in to my quarterback rankings. Oh, James Jones says not to me. Okay, good, James Jones. I thought you were coming after me already. But we got Brian Lippincott. A lot of people checking in. If I missed you, I apologize, but thanks for being here on the Philly Sports Power Hour. But I want to talk about the NFC and their quarterback rankings. Now, I'm not talking about the NFL. I'm not comparing Jalen Hurts to AFC quarterbacks when I talk about Jalen Hurts and his rankings. Because what we need to look at is, well, how do the Philadelphia Eagles, and we talked about this yesterday, how do the Philadelphia Eagles get back to the Super Bowl? So I'm not worried about who they would play when they get there. The important thing is you got to get there. So when we look at the quarterbacks in the NFC, I'm not talking about Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. Not worried about those quarterbacks right now. What I'm talking about is the quarterbacks in the NFC and where I rank Jalen Hurts in the NFC. And I think before we even get into the rankings, I think it's important that we look at Jalen Hurts' season last year. Because I think a lot of people are looking at the way the season ended and acting as if Jalen Hurts had this terrible season. Was it good enough? No, it wasn't good enough. Jalen Hurts' season wasn't good enough. But it wasn't as if this guy completely fell off a cliff and had a terrible season. And that's the way some people are talking about Jalen Hurts right now, which gets me upset because that's not the case. Jalen Hurts wasn't good enough last year. And we'll look at the numbers. He wasn't good enough. He needs to be better. I'm confident he will be better. But people who are acting like Jalen Hurts had this terrible season last year, it's just not the case. And I firmly believe that the struggles we saw with Jalen Hurts last night, I'm seeing Wine Niners Wine talking in the chat about last night. With the struggles you saw with Jalen Hurts last season, I think a lot of that had to do with the offensive coordinator, Brian Johnson, with the game plans, the play calling, the route concepts, the play designs. And I think Jalen Hurts had the success he had last year in spite of the offensive game plan, in spite of the offensive coordinator. So I'm not understanding this narrative that Jalen Hurts fell off a cliff. And let's look at the numbers. So in 2022, where everybody was saying, oh, Jalen Hurts is going to be the MVP. Jalen Hurts is the best. In 15 games, he threw for 3,700 yards and 22 touchdowns. Last year, he threw for close to 3,900 yards and 23 touchdowns. The issue was turnovers. The big change in Jalen Hurts from 2022 to 2023 were turnovers. He only threw 6 interceptions in 2022. Last year, he threw 15. That's the difference. That's why I say I'm not completely absolving Jalen Hurts for what he did last season. He needs to be better. You can't turn the ball over at that clip. You can't make bad decisions like Jalen Hurts made some bad decisions. But I think when we really take a step back and look at this objectively, it wasn't as if Jalen Hurts had this terrible season and people questioning whether or not the Philadelphia Eagles have a franchise quarterback. To me, that is a knee-jerk overreaction, especially when you factor in, and I see people in the chat saying, stop pointing fingers and making excuses. This isn't an excuse. When you factor in that Jalen Hurts had Brian Johnson as his offensive coordinator, a guy who's never called plays in the NFL before, a guy who got fired by the Eagles, and even though he interviewed for head coaching jobs, he didn't get one. Even though he interviewed for offensive coordinator jobs, he didn't get one. That tells me a lot. And there was all these fans and all these analysts saying when he was getting these interviews, you see, Brian Johnson is highly regarded in this league. BS. Highly regarded in this league. If he was highly regarded, he would have been an offensive coordinator somewhere. So you look at the play designs and the game plan, the fact that only 5% of Jalen Hurts' throws were between the hashes last year, 30 out of 30 for qualified quarterbacks. What Jalen Hurts did last season was in spite of the game planning and the offensive coordinators. So I'm not seeing that Jalen Hurts has fallen off a cliff. I'm not buying that. You don't go from what we saw from Jalen Hurts in 2022. You don't go from what Jalen Hurts did in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and then all of a sudden, oh, he stinks. I just don't like the overreactions. And that's what people are doing right now with Jalen. And you also have to remember, I don't think his knee injury was as bad as some people thought, but there was a period of time in the middle of the season where he was clearly hurt. It was obvious to every single person watching those games. There was something off with his knee. He wasn't as mobile as he was last year or 2 years ago, I should say. But you look at the final numbers, and outside of the turnovers, and I'm not minimizing that, it's a big deal, but outside of the turnovers, the final numbers weren't that bad. And he did it with an offensive coordinator who lost his damn job. And I had some people, because I posted these rankings that we're going to get into in a second, I had some people come after me and say, oh, how do you put him that high throwing 15 interceptions? Do you know who threw 14 interceptions last season? Who's the best quarterback in the NFL? Hands down. Every single person in the chat should say it in unison. Who is the best quarterback in the NFL? And it's not even close. Patrick Mahomes. You know how many interceptions Patrick Mahomes threw last year? 14. Jalen Hurts threw 15. And now we want to act like Jalen Hurts stinks because he threw 15 interceptions. Stop. Stop overreacting to Jalen Hurts, okay? Because this year, with Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator, with an actual competent offensive coordinator calling plays, designing plays, having route concepts that actually get the ball to your playmakers in space to allow them to pick up that yards after catch that the Eagles did so well 2 years ago under Shane Steichen, and with the same personnel dropped to the bottom of the league last year. When you have a guy like Kellen Moore designing these plays, I want every single one of you, if you want to clip this, screen record it, I'm telling you right now, you're going to come back to me next season, and you're going to say, Bill, you were right. Jalen Hurts is that good. And what we saw in 2023 was the product of bad offensive game planning, bad play calling, bad route concepts. Clip it, record it, and you come back to me next season. Because one thing I have faith in is Jalen Hurts. And we'll talk about either later this show if we have time, or we'll do it tomorrow, about Howie Roseman and how they build this defense and whether or not we have faith in Howie Roseman. But I do have faith in Jalen Hurts. And you look at not only the 6 interceptions in 2022 and then the 15 interceptions in 2023, the other problem were fumbles. But what's interesting is he has 5 fumbles lost in 2023. He only had 2 in 2022, but he actually had 9 fumbles each season. It just in 2022, he was a little luckier because Eagles players jumped on him. Last year, the opposing team jumped on him. So 9 fumbles, too much. He's got to clean that up too. And I see people in the chat. What do we got? Jason Lombardi, you lost me. I was a Bill fanboy, and this take is obviously too much fan, not objective. Tell me how I'm not being objective. Tell me how I'm not being objective about Jalen Hurts. So the guy we saw in 2022, the guy who had a stat line in Super Bowl 57 we've never seen before, who outperformed Patrick Mahomes in Super Bowl 57. I know they lost the game. He outperformed Patrick Mahomes in Super Bowl 57, and you can't tell me otherwise. And then you look at the first 11 games of the year that we just saw in 2023, Jalen Hurts was the odds-on favorite to win the MVP through the first 12 weeks of last season. And now we want to sit here because of the way the season ended, which I agree wasn't good enough, and we want to act like Jalen Hurts stinks. I don't get that. And this isn't me being a fanboy. This is me being objective. If you look at Jalen Hurts over his first 3 seasons in the NFL as a starter, you cannot say that Jalen Hurts stinks. And I think what we have a lot of from not only fans, but especially analysts, is there's a lot of people who were wrong about Jalen Hurts when he was drafted. I happen to be a guy who was high on Jalen Hurts the moment they drafted him. I got videos on my social media. You could go back and you could watch it, that I was high on Jalen from the beginning, and he proved me right last year. And I still think there are people who were wrong about Jalen Hurts who love to now say, see, I told you he wasn't good. You see, I told you Jalen Hurts is never going to win. I told you Jalen Hurts stinks. You got to admit when you're wrong. And this is me being objective. To say Jalen Hurts stinks as a quarterback is wrong. So let's look at the NFC, because this is where this whole conversation started. And I see on TikTok, Crazy Cut Comics says most people don't realize that Jalen has done all of this with 5 or 6 different offensive coordinators since college. And that's true. Shane Steichen in 2022 was the first time he had an offensive coordinator for back-to-back seasons since you go back to high school for him. And when you give him a bad offensive coordinator in Brian Johnson, this is what you see. I don't see anybody making excuses for Josh Allen. Or, excuse me, I do see people making excuses for Josh Allen. Josh Allen, at the beginning of the season, had Ken Dorsey as his offensive coordinator. He was turning the ball over like crazy. They fire Ken Dorsey. And then Josh Allen's game improves, and they go on a nice run into the playoffs. But Josh Allen still put at the top of everybody's list. Oh, Josh Allen's the best. Josh Allen's great. Oh, it was his offensive coordinator. And now you have Jalen Hurts, whose offensive coordinator gets fired, and it's Jalen Hurts stinks. But let's look at the NFC, because I don't even want to talk about, and I see people on TikTok comparing him to Carson Wentz. And I've had this conversation before, that I don't think they're the same people. I don't think they're the same person. I think what you saw with Carson Wentz was a lot of due to injury, stubbornness. I think Jalen Hurts is a different makeup than him. And thankfully, he hasn't had that big injury. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But let's just look at the NFC. And I want to see if you guys agree with me or not. Because I look around the NFC, and I still have Jalen Hurts ranked as the best quarterback in the NFC, not the NFL. I'm just looking at the NFC. And here are my quarterback rankings in the NFC. Coming in dead last. And this could be changed. There's going to be free agency. There's going to be the draft. But right now, you look at these teams. These are who the quarterbacks are. So I have ranked dead last, number 16, Desmond Ridder. Number 15, Bryce Young. Number 14, Daniel Jones. And the best part is Daniel Jones' cap hit next year is $47 million. Oh, I'm losing you, TikTok. $47 million. Jalen Hurts is $13.5 million. We've talked about this before. Everybody wants to talk, they paid him $250-something million. It doesn't matter what the total number is. What matters in the NFL is the cap hit. That's all that matters. When you're trying to build a roster, and we know the salary cap is going to be about $242 million next year, what matters is cap hits. Jalen Hurts is 13.5. Daniel Jones, who I rank 14 out of 16 in the NFC, is $47 million. So good luck, Giants. 13, I have Baker Mayfield. I don't care what happened in the wild card game. I had people coming at me, Baker Mayfield outperformed Jalen Hurts in the wild card game. It was one game. It was a different season. I'm looking at objectively over the last few years, Jalen Hurts is above Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, 13. I got Derek Carr at 12. I have Kyler Murray at 11. I think Kyler Murray is extremely overrated. And I see people in the chat talking about Jalen Hurts against the blitz, and we'll talk about that. Because, again, I put that more on the coaches than I do on Jalen. Chuck Hutton says you keep getting brought back to the beginning of the show. I don't know. YouTube messes around sometimes. Anyway, Kyler Murray I have at number 11. I don't think he's very good. 10, I have Justin Fields, who may not be in Chicago next year. There's a chance he could be in Atlanta. There's a chance he could be in New England. Number 9, I have Sam Howell. And I know Sam Howell is probably not even going to be on the Commanders next year, but I think Sam Howell on a really bad Commanders team showed us that he can play. I know things at the end of the season went south for Sam Howell when they started unloading all their players. But I have Sam Howell ranked at number 9 in the NFC. I had some people disagree with me on that one. But I have Sam Howell at number 9. Number 8, I have Geno Smith. Number 7, I have Kirk Cousins. Now, Kirk Cousins, free agent again. He may not be on the Minnesota Vikings, but right now he is. I got him at number 7. You may see Kirk Cousins in the AFC. Number 6, and this is where my list starts to get controversial from some people on Twitter yesterday. Number 6, I have Matt Stafford. A few years ago, I put Matt Stafford a lot higher, but he's getting older. So right now, going into 2024, I have Matt Stafford number 6 on my list. At number 5, I have Brock Purdy. For me, I actually think Brock Purdy is a lot better than people give him credit for. I don't think he's just a system quarterback. But I don't think he's number 1 in the NFC either. So I have Brock Purdy at number 5. At number 4, here we go. Dak Prescott, number 4. And the reason I have Dak Prescott at number 4 is because all it is about in this league is winning in the playoffs, winning big games, and Dak Prescott has never done it, and I don't think Dak Prescott will ever do it. He's going to put up great numbers in the regular season. You play fantasy football, Dak Prescott, great quarterback to have on your team. But I have him at number 4 in the NFC. At number 3, and this is a quarterback that could very easily skyrocket to number 1, and that's Jordan Love. Jordan Love could very easily be not only the best quarterback in the NFC after next season, but one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm just not ready to put him there yet because we've only seen it for half a season. Jordan Love only started playing well around Thanksgiving. So I'm not putting Jordan Love number 1 or number 2 just yet, but he could get there. Extremely good, especially with a great coach in Matt LaFleur. At number 2, this is a quarterback that I said last offseason that I thought was extremely underrated and has been underrated his entire career, and that's Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff has been so underrated throughout his career. I think he's an extremely good quarterback. I have him at number 2 in the NFC. But my number 1 quarterback in the NFC, and people can call me a homer, I'm looking at this objectively, is Jalen Hurts. What quarterback in the NFC would you put above Jalen Hurts? I want to hear from you in the chat. Who would you put above Jalen Hurts in the NFC right now? I'm not putting Dak Prescott above Jalen Hurts. What has Dak Prescott ever won? He's been a starter a lot longer than Jalen Hurts. He's never brought his team to a Super Bowl. He's never brought his team to an NFC championship game, for God's sakes. Brock Purdy, I'm not putting him above Jalen. Brock Purdy in the Super Bowl didn't even come close to the stat line Jalen Hurts put up in the Super Bowl. And I told you, Jordan Love, he could get there. But just like people wanted to talk about Jalen Hurts, oh, do it for more than one season, we've only seen Jordan Love do it for half a season. They were 9-8 this year. Sometimes I think we have this short-term memory. We only look at the last few games of last season. Oh, Jordan Love's great and Jalen Hurts stinks. Let's do it for a lot longer. So that's why I don't rank Jordan Love higher. And then you have Matt Stafford. I know some people love Stafford. He's getting up there in years. I'm not taking Matt Stafford at this point in his career above Jalen Hurts. I'm just not doing it. In his prime, sure. When Matt Stafford was with the Detroit Lions his first year in LA, when they win a Super Bowl, sure, I put him above Hurts, but not now. Not at 36. So who else you putting above him? Who else you putting above Jalen Hurts in the NFC? And someone on TikTok's asking about Geno Smith. I have him ranked 8th in the NFC right now. I just don't want us to have this short-term memory and this overreaction that Jalen Hurts somehow isn't a good quarterback anymore. Let's see what he does with an actual competent offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. Let's see what he does when you have a guy who can actually design plays and call plays at the NFL level before people start overreacting to that Jalen Hurts stinks. And my man flexing and stepping saying, hey, this is Homer talk. I don't understand how this is Homer talk. How can we sit here now after seeing Jalen Hurts as a starter for 3 seasons where really things were only bad for, 6 or 7 games of Jalen Hurts, and now say he stinks? It's such an overreaction. It's typical, honestly, of how we overreact and knee-jerk to things in this city. I'm telling you, favorite this damn video, clip this damn video, because this season, when you see what Jalen Hurts can do with a real offensive coordinator, I want every single one of you to come back, every one of you to come back and say, Bill, you were right. You were right. Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback in the NFC. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I want to talk about Chris Sims and what he had to say about Jalen Hurts, because he just can't stop with the hate of Jalen Hurts. So we'll talk about that. We'll do a little bit of Phillies talk as well, because it was interesting yesterday. It came out, a free agent that they went after and actually offered him the most money of any team, and he didn't sign with the Phillies. So we'll get into that as well. I'm Bill Colarulo. This is the Philly Sports Power Hour. Hit that like button. We'll be right back.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you, Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back in to the Philly Sports Power Hour with Bill Colarulo. Before the break, talking about my man Jalen Hurts. Some of you agree, a lot of you disagree. When I say Jalen Hurts is still the best quarterback in the NFC, I think a lot of people are just overreacting to the way the season ended instead of looking at the big picture and looking at Jalen Hurts over his first 3 seasons as a starter in this league. And I think when you look at the season he had last year, it's amazing he even had the success he had with the incompetence at the offensive coordinator spot. And we're going to find out a lot. We're going to learn a lot this year with Kellen Moore. But I think Jalen Hurts is going to be the MVP type of quarterback you saw in 2022. And as we're talking about that, what are the odds right now for Jalen to win MVP next year? Let me take a look at that. They have that up yet? Let's see. So Jalen Hurts right now has the 9th best odds to win MVP next season. So it doesn't sound like Vegas thinks that Jalen Hurts stinks. 9th best. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is tied with Dak and ahead of Tua Tagovailoa. Matthew Stafford plus 3,000. Jalen Hurts plus 1,500. So, and I see people on TikTok, Hurts is not a top quarterback. So ridiculous, those takes, man. I still don't understand how people can say that Jalen Hurts is not a top quarterback in this league. Doesn't make any sense to me after what we've seen the first 3 seasons. Because of what happened at the end of last season with an incompetent offensive coordinator and horrible game planning with no plan to pick up the blitz, look at the route concepts. Look at the route designs of what Jalen Hurts was dealing with. And yeah, blame Jalen Hurts when you're running 4 verticals against the blitz every damn time. When you refuse to have routes over the middle and inside the hashes. I told you the biggest stat for me is, let me see if I could find the exact numbers, but the biggest stat for me is when I look at the yards after catch. Because you went from, in 2022, where we got this. Hold on. In 2022, the Philadelphia Eagles were like top of the league in yards after catch, in average yards after catch. Yeah, here we go. This is for me very telling of how incompetent the offensive game plan and play calling was and the route designs. In 2022, with pretty much the same personnel on offense, same personnel. In fact, I would argue the 2023 personnel was better with regard to yards after catch because you took Miles Sanders and replaced him with DeAndre Swift. So in 2022, with Shane Steichen designing the plays, you were top 5 in the NFL in average yards after catch. In 2023, same personnel, really an upgrade to DeAndre Swift. You dropped to 25th in the league in yards after catch, average yards after catch. Number 5 to number 25 with really better personnel. To me, that is a telltale sign that what you saw last year was route designs and play concepts. There's no reason why this team with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and DeAndre Swift and Dallas Goedert should not be in the tops of the league for yards after catch. And I see people on TikTok and here on YouTube, Steve Thomas talking about, well, what about the turnovers? I told you, Jalen Hurts needs to clean up the turnovers. There's no doubt about that. I'm not making an excuse for him on the turnovers. But you weren't saying that in 2022. When he only threw 6 interceptions in 2022, turnovers weren't an issue. But because he has 1 year where he has 15 interceptions, this is where it doesn't make sense to me. The Jalen Hurts haters want to take one season, 2023, where he throws 15 interceptions and say, look, he stinks. But then you refer to 2022 and it's, oh, that was only one season. You can't say he's good. It's only one season. But we can look at one season of 15 interceptions and say he stinks? Doesn't make sense. You only want to use that argument when it fits your narrative. He stinks because he had one season with 15 interceptions, but he's not good because it was only one season where he was good. It doesn't fit the narrative. You got to look at the whole picture. And you talk about, and I said this before the break, I think a lot of what you see with Jalen Hurts is people who were wrong about him love that he struggled down the stretch. Love it. Because they get to say, see, I told you. And there's no Jalen Hurts hater bigger than Chris Sims. Chris Sims can't stop hating on Jalen Hurts. And he was on the Phoenix Cardinals podcast. And he said that Jalen Hurts is the most overrated player in the NFL. And they were discussing quarterbacks that Kyler Murray is better than, and he said Jalen Hurts. To me, you're losing. You are losing me right there. You cannot tell me Kyler Murray is better than Jalen Hurts. I don't care what arguments you have. Kyler Murray is not better than Jalen Hurts. The guy who had to have put into his contract that he would watch film instead of playing video games isn't better than Jalen Hurts. I'm sorry. But let's just look at Chris Sims, because when he says that Jalen Hurts is overrated, Chris Sims is overrated. First of all, Chris Sims, back in 2021, when looking at the quarterbacks in the draft, ranked Zach Wilson above Trevor Lawrence, and whatever, you can make those mistakes. But this is what he said about Zach Wilson. He said Zach Wilson's baseline, the starting point, was Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes. He said that's where it starts for Zach Wilson. That's Chris Sims. And you look at 2021. First of all, he hated Hurts coming out of college. Hated him in the 2020 draft. Couldn't admit he was wrong. 2021 doesn't even put Hurts in his top 40 quarterbacks. And then in 2022, he puts him at 25. And he ranks Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Daniel Jones, Jimmy G, Carson Wentz, Mac Jones, Baker Mayfield, Ryan Tannehill, Matt Ryan, Kyler Murray, and Derek Carr higher than Jalen Hurts. Get the hell out of here, Sims. And then last year, he had to kind of admit he's wrong. He puts him at number 7. But this is what I think you're seeing about Jalen Hurts. There were so many people who were wrong about this guy who love now to try to say, see, I told you he wasn't good. Instead of just admitting that what you saw last year was a bad offensive coordinator. But Chris Sims is an idiot. I don't even know why I give him any time. I really shouldn't even give him any time. But that's what I feel about Jalen Hurts. And then we talked about this briefly. When I talk about Hurts being the best quarterback in the NFC, you have to look at these cap hits, man. Because it's not only Daniel Jones. We talked about it before the break. Daniel Jones has a $47 million cap hit. Stafford is close to $50 million. Kyler Murray, $52 million. Dak Prescott, over $59 million. Even Derek Carr, $36 million. Jared Goff, $32 million. Geno Smith, $31 million. And then you look at Jalen this year, $13.5 million. So there's a lot to like about Jalen Hurts. And I see Edgardo Rosario on TikTok, who I'm believing is a 49ers fan after reading all these comments, but says, hey, what's Brock Purdy's cap hit? You got Brock Purdy for one more year on a cheap cap hit, man. One more year. Players are eligible to get new contracts after 3 full seasons. So Purdy's entering his 3rd season. So next offseason, Purdy will get his new deal. But I'm not worried about the 49ers. I talked about this yesterday. We just learned in this city how hard it is to lose a Super Bowl and try to get back. You know all too well as 49ers fans. Back at Super Bowl 54, after blowing a 10-point lead to the Chiefs, how was the next season after that? 6-10. So you just blew another 10-point lead. And then had Kyle Shanahan knee-jerk, blame somebody else, and fire your defensive coordinator, who had one of the best defenses in the league this year. Good luck with that. And Brandon Ayuk wants a new deal. Good luck with that. And you're close to cap hell. So good luck with that. 49ers, not worried about you, man. And clip that one, too, if you want to come back and talk to me next season. Because I'm not worried about the 49ers. So, another thing that happened that got reported that the Kansas City Chiefs did, talking about the 49ers and them not knowing the rules about overtime. But something that the Kansas City Chiefs did, which was great, and we give Andy Reid all the credit in the world, but this is the problem I have sometimes with us in Philadelphia, and I'm a part of the media now, and I have a problem with Philadelphia media, is that we overreact, and we're constantly negative about our sports teams, constantly. And you hear all the time about the Philadelphia Eagles, and analytics are ruining this team, and they have analytics too much involved. And I agree to an extent. Sometimes analytics are too involved in decision-making. But the Chiefs are being praised because their analytics department, the head of their analytics, a guy named Mike Frazier, their analytics coordinator, Andy Reid allows him to get up at team meetings and gives him plenty of time to talk to the team about analytics. And before the playoffs, Andy Reid had Mike Frazier, the analytics coordinator, get up, according to Travis Kelce, 3 or 4 times in a 2-week span to go over all of the overtime rules from an analytics perspective and why they would make the decision to kick off if they got into overtime. Turned out to be brilliant. Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers didn't have a clue in overtime of the Super Bowl, and they took the ball. The Chiefs, they were ready for it. They prepared for it. They knew they didn't want the ball. If you see some of the mic'd ups, Kelsey, Mahomes, they're cheering on the sidelines that the 49ers took the ball. And then you see Kyle Juszczyk, fullback for the 49ers, being like, do you know if we score a touchdown, we don't actually win the game? I didn't know that. So we give the Chiefs all the credit in the world because they had their analytics department talk to their team. Could you imagine if that got leaked in Philly? Could you imagine if it got leaked that Nick Sirianni has the analytics coordinator get up and talk to his team for a couple of times a week? We'd be like, you see, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, they stink. Analytics stink. And I'm not saying I agree with everything Roseman does. I'm just saying we can't be overly negative. And I feel like you guys attack me for being overly positive. I'm not being positive. I'm trying to be objective. Because, look, I get it. Doing sports talk, what moves the needle, controversy, negativity. This person stinks. That person stinks. This person needs to be fired. It's what drives the needle. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say things just for the hot take. I'm not going to say things just to get people buzzing. I'm going to tell you how I truly feel about things. So love me or hate me for it, but you're going to get truth and objectivity from me all the time. So let's talk about the Phillies, because I don't necessarily agree with all the moves that Dombrowski and John Middleton always make, but you talk about going for it. Middleton said when he got here he wanted his damn trophy back, and he has shown he has no problem spending money. And now it gets reported. We knew the Phillies made a strong push for Yoshinobu Yamamoto before he signed with the Dodgers, but it's now being reported how strong of a push the Phillies made for Yamamoto. They met with him and his team for over 3 hours. They had an entire video presentation that included Bryce Harper pitching Yamamoto on why he should come to Philadelphia, and they offered him the biggest contract of any team, including the LA Dodgers. And just to refresh your memory, the LA Dodgers signed him to a 12-year, $325 million deal that included the largest guarantee for any pitcher ever, and it's being reported that the Phillies actually offered him more. So I take two things from this. One, credit to the Phillies, credit to John Middleton for going for it. They don't mind spending money. They don't care about the luxury tax. They truly do want to win a championship in this city, and I love it. But the other thing I take from this is that East Coast baseball teams are at a severe disadvantage with the Japanese stars. Because these stars that come over from Japan, you can't compete with the fact that they can play on the West Coast. They can play in LA. It's a shorter flight home to Japan. The fans in Japan love the West Coast teams. It's going to be extremely difficult for East Coast teams to be able to compete with the West Coast teams in trying to land these stars, because it wasn't only Yamamoto that signed with LA. It was also another big Japanese star, Ohtani, who signed in LA. So, look, the more stars that keep coming over from Japan, the harder it's going to be for these East Coast teams to get them. Because even though the Phillies offered him the most money, he chose to sign in LA for less. But still a lot to like about this Philadelphia Phillies team. And we talked about it yesterday. I really love the addition of Whit Merrifield. Whiz Wit, they're calling him. I think he adds a lot of versatility to this lineup. And I know there's some talk about, do they add another starting pitcher? Montgomery's available. There's a lot of people talking about Trevor Bauer and should they bring him in to solidify the bullpen. I don't want Bauer. I don't know about you here in the chat. I don't want Bauer. One of the best things this team has going right now is that clubhouse, the culture that they have built. In fact, Whit Merrifield yesterday said one of the reasons he came here was because he's heard how great that clubhouse is. And if you've watched this team over the last couple of seasons, it's obvious how good that clubhouse is. This is a close-knit group, and it's really helped them overcome 2 years in a row of slow starts. But I don't want to add Trevor Bauer to that mix. You can keep him. And I see CZ in the chat talking about Blake Snell. I just don't know if the Phillies would be better served right now going into this season with the lineup and the roster that you have. And let's see what happens. And as the trade deadline approaches, maybe there's another pitcher you could make a move for at the trade deadline. So instead of going out and getting a Montgomery or a Blake Snell right now, I think I'm almost okay saying, hey, let's roll with what we have. Let's see how things play out. And when the trade deadline approaches, let's see what our needs are, and you can make a move then. But don't bring in Trevor Bauer. Don't give him a chance to disrupt the chemistry that this locker room and this clubhouse has. So I see Gary Williams 1965 on TikTok saying he would rather have Montgomery. And look, it's a possibility. I mean, the longer this goes without Montgomery signing anywhere, it's definitely a possibility that maybe they get him on a one-year deal. Maybe you can get him a little bit cheaper. So, I don't know. Because it's moving slow. I would have thought he would have signed by now. Because you also look at these pitchers. They want to be in their rhythm. They want to be in their routine. Spring training's starting now. So these guys don't want to sit out too long. They want to get into their routine. So I'm expecting some news to come out about Montgomery and Snell rather quickly. But look, I like the starting pitching right now. I know people want to maybe upgrade, but you got Zach Wheeler, who please sign him long-term. I know Dombrowski said yesterday that's the priority right now, to get Wheeler locked up, get that deal done. You still have Aaron Nola. And if you look at his trajectory of his career, up-down seasons, this should be an up season for him. And I love Ranger Suarez, especially in the postseason. Ranger Suarez, man, ice in his veins. And then let's see what we have in Tawan Walker and Christopher Sanchez. And I see William on TikTok saying the bullpen's the problem. I'm actually okay with the bullpen right now, with Alvarado and Dominguez and Hoffman and Soto and Strom. But the guy I'm really excited about is Orion Kirkring. You saw what he could do last year. I know he had that one bad outing in the postseason, but he was young. Now an entire season with Kirkring in the major leagues, I'm excited about it. So we'll see what happens. But tomorrow on the show, hopefully we'll be joined by Kayla Santiago like she usually does on Wednesdays. She couldn't make last week. She had to do a news thing. She works for Delmarva Sports too. But hopefully she'll be on tomorrow. We'll talk some Sixers. But I also want to get into this Eagles defense tomorrow on the show, because I think that's the big question mark. You know how I feel about Jalen Hurts. We just went over it. I'm not worried about the offense. So we'll talk about the defense tomorrow and what I think this Eagles team needs to do. But like we end every Philly Sports Power Hour with a little Today in Sports history, February 20th, 1993, the Florida Marlins had their first ever spring training. And the reason I made this our Today in Sports history, because the Florida Marlins, first ever spring training, 1993, they have won 2 World Series, 1997 and 2003. The Philadelphia Phillies have been around since 1883. And you know how many World Series they've won? Two. The Florida Marlins were established 110 years later than the Philadelphia Phillies, and both franchises have 2 World Series championships. That's why when I say we are starved for championships in this town, this is what I'm talking about. Damn. Didn't want to end the show on a negative like that. But I see people in the chat talking about the Flyers, asking if I talk Flyers. We do talk hockey. I'm a big Flyers fan. They're back in action on Wednesday night, tomorrow night, against Chicago. You've heard Tortorella. He's nervous about that game because you come off the high of the outdoor game and you lose it. They need to bounce back. They had points in 5 straight until that outdoor loss to the Devils. Let's hope they bounce back in a big way. We'll do some Flyers talk tomorrow as well in preparation for the game against the Blackhawks. And the Sixers are back in action on Thursday against the Knicks, and they start a tough stretch of teams now. Let's see what they can do with hopefully a lot of guys coming back healthy. Not Joel yet, but let's hope they get a lot of these other guys back. DeAnthony Melton, Nico Batum. We'll probably see Kyle Lowry in a Sixers uniform for the first time. So I'm hoping Nick Nurse can design an offense that gets this team going so that they could stay afloat until the playoffs come. I don't want to be in a playoff where it's a play-in tournament. Let's be a 6 seed or higher, and let's hope Joel comes back. But we'll do some Sixers talk as well. But this was the Philly Sports Power Hour. I know all of you didn't necessarily agree with me in the chat, but I've told you before, I love that you're here. I love that you're engaging, whether we agree or not. Love spending this hour with all of you. But make sure you're following me on all your social media platforms. Make sure you're following me on X and Instagram and TikTok. But make sure you're following me here on YouTube as well, because I know you follow JAKIB Sports. But in addition to me posting this show on my YouTube, I also put YouTube shorts up a lot. So head on over to Bill Colarulo Philly Sports Talk on YouTube. Hit that like button and share button on the way out. And as always, go Birds.
Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.